God, I am so technologically awesome. So I need to have like 5 of the thumbs up to tell me everything's okay, because I don't have Brandon here to tell me. Can you float those things on the screen? Nobody's floating anything on the screen. Well, hey, there's one. Do I have another one? Any more? I needed 5. That's a heart. I got 1 thumbs up and 1 heart. 1 goofy looking face. 2 goofy looking faces. 1 thumbs down from John Curtin. Okay, I got enough. I'm gonna go with it, and so we're gonna start right here, live from my kitchen. And so, this is so brand new to me, and it's ridiculous that I'm actually doing this. But I want to start off by saying this to you. Today in my office, when we were live streaming, we recognized that there were problems. And so one of the problems that we're facing and we're working on already today is the problem of Facebook worldwide has been kind of blown up because of churches that are live streaming on Sunday mornings at the same time that we are. And so there was a huge bandwidth problem that was happening right at the time that we were, that we were live streaming. And so we were scrambling right at that moment to see what we could do and try to fix it, try to fix the volume, try to, get around things. But hopefully we made it through. And everybody got at least a little bit, and Brandon has been working on it this afternoon to put on a cleaned up copy onto our Facebook page. And so if you want to go back and look at it again, you can. So we'll see. So you know what? Be patient. We are not the big dogs on this one. I'll tell you that. But we're getting better every week at how we go about doing this. Now this is really interesting, because I am trying to watch myself in my little camera, and thank you, Chad, for telling me that I'm sideways. My screen, I can barely see my face because of all of the comments that are that are cycling right now. So if you've got a problem, here, from me to you, deal with it, all right? Because we're going to come back at this at the end of tonight and see what all the different problems were, and then go about trying to fix them. So if I am sideways, then turn your head sideways, or listen sideways, or whatever you want. I don't know, but fix it yourself. And because not much I can do about it right now. Anyway, this is kind of scary, because you know how you watch television and the police officer or the reporter comes up or whatever and says, can I tell you this off the record? And off the record means there's no accountability for what's being said. And so when you put me off the record, that is a risky proposition. And so this is kind of off the record, and it's kind of me. I mean, I've got some notes here that I'm going to try to follow, but it is it's pretty dangerous stuff. And I'm gonna tell you some kind of behind the the scenes of what I talked about today, some things that I was thinking about that led me to the words that I chose this morning. This week was a struggle on a number of different levels. I was actually sick for most of the week with a stomach virus, and just kind of bumbled through the week trying to read and trying to study and prepare and so forth. And so I felt like I was playing catch up all week long and was struggling to find the words and even to find the topic. And I just kept coming back to this idea of Palm Sunday. Now, the truth of the matter is, I grew up in a church that didn't, I'm not even sure we ever referred to Palm Sunday. That was the way that the Presbyterians talked, or that was the way that the Anglican church down the street talked about the Holy Week, and they had the liturgies and the common book of prayer, and these were things that when I was a boy growing up, and even into my young adulthood, I absolutely didn't understand those things. They didn't make any sense to me at all. And so you fast forward to 25 years ago when I first got to North Point, we would have periodically some people that would go, hey, we need to, Mike, are you going to have a Palm Sunday sermon? And I would say, sure, I'm gonna preach the Sunday before Easter, so that will be a Palm Sunday sermon. Not really realizing that a Palm Sunday sermon had a particular kind of substance to it. Or they would ask, are we going to have a Maundy Thursday service or a Good Friday service? And those things were like really foreign to me. I didn't get it. And through the years, as I have developed friendships with Anglicans and Episcopalians and Catholics, and many of our people at North Point who come out of Methodist background or Lutheran and so forth, they have helped me understand the traditions of their church or their past, and I feel like I have come away with a better understanding. Now, Easter, I understood Easter because in my church growing up, Easter was a sunrise service at the beach. Easter was the pancake breakfast that we would have at our church following the sunrise service out at the beach. And Easter was the special choir song that they had worked for 3 months on to sing on that day. And Easter was everybody dressing up for church even a little more than what they normally did. And for many it was getting a new Easter outfit or something like that. And then we would go home and there was a special meal for Easter, and we would hunt for Easter eggs. And I never questioned what the connection was between the bunny and Jesus. I just knew that both of them were kind of good things, and it worked. And but Easter had this something extra to it. It was full of pomp and circumstance, and there was a flow to the Easter service that we didn't have on any other Sunday out of the year. And as I entered into the ranks of being a youth minister, and I was on staff at a church and so forth, I quickly began to understand that Easter was the Super Bowl of the church. It was the biggest of big days. And I always knew that it was connected to the death and the burial and the resurrection of Jesus. There was never any question about that. But it was almost as if I didn't need to read the details of the story in the Bible because they were apparently so well known. We were all comfortable with it, and we told and retold the story. In that way, it was much like Christmas, and how when you look at the details of the story as they're recorded in the Bible, sometimes you find different things. Sometimes you find things that are completely and totally unexpected. I can tell you this about Palm Sunday, about the Easter story in general, but about Palm Sunday in particular. I missed it. I didn't see the significance in it. And now as I've grown older, I'm not so sure that many people have really seen it. It was like a complete eye-opener in this story that once I saw it, it was like, oh my goodness, I couldn't not see it anymore. And I think I've struggled to retell that story over the years, partly because I didn't want to burst the Easter bubble, maybe. Sometimes when you tell a different side of such a familiar story, it can leave people going, oh, well, why did you tell me that? It's not the same as it used to be. Well, I'm going to say this tonight. I don't want Easter to be the same as it was. I don't want it to be the same as it was at all. If you have done what I did in my life, and that was to miss the point. Okay, time out. Somebody's coming up to my house, okay? And so if they knock on the door or ring the doorbell, Wanda, okay, I don't know who it is. This apparently is why we don't do this kind of stuff. But, well, it's a delivery. Well, whoever was out there right now and decided to send us a present, I am so thankful. You are so nice. I don't know what it is. Oh, okay. Anyway, thank you. Anyway, back to what I was talking about. Palm Sunday is all about this thing that was called the triumphal entry. We are coming up on Jesus' last days, and he is making his entrance into Jerusalem. So there's kind of this ascension up into Jerusalem and so forth. And we read about it in three of the gospel accounts. And the one that I read from this morning out of Matthew, it told the story that Jesus sent a couple of his disciples out to find a donkey. And it's fascinating because if you look at the story, he says, go out and get a donkey to bring back to me so I can ride the donkey into town. And you think, really? But why is that significant? Well, it's significant in that Jesus even says, this is being done to fulfill the prophecy, and he doesn't say the actual name, but it's to fulfill the prophecy that was written about in Zechariah, that he would ride in on a donkey. So, I'm reading this again for the first time and going, Jesus, are you just telling them to go get a donkey because you know that by them going and getting a donkey and you riding in on it, it's going to fulfill prophecy? I wouldn't put it past Jesus to do it for that reason. Because as I'm going to tell you here in a second, the donkey doesn't make any sense. At least not to me. Not at all. You know, there are some commentators that I read this week that said the donkey has, in certain kinds of cultures and back in those days, the donkey was symbolic of victory and symbolic of greatness and whatever. And oh gosh, I want to give commentators the benefit of the doubt, but it just seems like such a reach to me, because really, it's a donkey. That's how I'm taking this. It's a donkey. The King of Kings is going to ride into town on a donkey. And why I say it that way is that these are people who are expecting the king to come into town. These are people that have been waiting on the Messiah for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they had heard about Jesus and they had seen some of what he had done, and he had healed the sick, and he had raised some people from the dead, and he had performed some other miracles, and word had gotten out that maybe, just maybe, this was the promised Messiah who was going to come and establish the new kingdom, the kingdom that they had been waiting on for centuries. A king who was going to come and conquer the Roman Empire. A king that was going to come and put a beat down on the Egyptians and the Assyrians and any of the others that had abused and taken advantage of the Jews for years and put them into slavery and made them function as worms on the earth. Yeah, they were waiting for the Messiah to come and set right hundreds of years of slavery. And he rides in on a donkey. There's just something about that doesn't sit with me. A king that's going to conquer the Roman Empire at least ought to be riding in on a massive golden chariot with majestic horses that are pulling him through town in a robe, and his most loyal subjects, the disciples, will be decked out in the right kind of bling, you know, that disciples of the great king would be wearing. Instead, this king comes in on a donkey. He comes in on a donkey, and not just riding in on a donkey, but he's been telling them that he's gonna get put to death. Yeah, the king that's going to get killed. He's telling them that in advance. He tells them that he's going to be a king with no throne, in a kingdom that has no boundaries, no discernible walls that show or delineate where the kingdom actually is. And on top of it, he has said that his kingdom was going to include outcasts and drunkards and prostitutes and the people that others didn't want. And he even said, you that are rich, you better be careful, because this kingdom is for them and not for you. And if you want to get on board with this kingdom, you're going to have to really reevaluate how you live your life and how you look at your riches. This was going to be a kingdom that actually forgave enemies and turned the other cheek, where greatness was going to be found in serving others, not in being served. And I think that the disciples, when Jesus would tell these stories, and often they were told in the form of parables and so forth, I think they looked at him, and in their minds they're going, God, really? Is this really what we signed on to do? Is this, seriously, is this the kind of kingdom that we are going to be involved in? And Jesus continued to hammer this home to them. And every now and then we can see in the stories of the New Testament, it's like a light bulb goes on for one or two of the disciples, and then something happens and they just sort of go right back to the small thinking that they had before Jesus started to teach them. And Jesus would come back at them with another parable or another story or another teaching, another angle, another something to try to get them to grab a hold of this thing, and it just seemed to be missing all along. And so in this triumphal entry, I think secretly each of the disciples and then all of the crowds who had been with him for weeks, kind of following him along and watching him do what he had been doing, I think they were all secretly going, now maybe this is the moment. Maybe this is the moment that he's going to break out the big stuff. And everybody is going to see, and it's going to reverberate all the way up to Rome, that the new king is in town. And what happens? He rides in on a donkey. I can't get away from it. I can't get away from that part of the story. And so I refuse to get away from it now. Somehow I missed it for years of my life. And it was right there in front of my nose. In the passage that I read this morning out of Luke that tells about this story, it's in Luke 19. I'm going to read the whole part of it. It's verse 37 to verse 42. And just kind of listen to how Luke records the story. And remember, Luke is one of his followers. Luke is one of those guys that wasn't getting it. Luke is one of the guys that had been up until this point missing it and not understanding. And he writes it this way: when Jesus came near the place where the road goes down to the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of disciples began to joyfully praise God in loud voices for all the miracles that they had seen. God, I bet they did. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest. Some of the Pharisees, now the Pharisees again, they are the religious elite among the Jews. They were the ones that knew the stories. They were the ones that were certainly anticipating the Messiah to come. And they didn't believe for a second it was Jesus. Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." "I tell you," he replied, "if they keep quiet, the stones will cry out." Remember that song, "Ain't No Rock"? That's where this comes from. And then here is kind of the clincher of this story that sets up Jesus' final words. As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it. And he said, if you, even you had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. If you, even you, had only known this. I grew up in an era of Bible contests. Some of you who are older did that, where you would have to tell the verses of Scripture that you memorized, stand up and say one. Well, let me tell you, the verse that we all memorized quickly out of John chapter 11, I can't remember, it's verse 30, I don't know, 35, I think. But it was the verse that said, Jesus wept. Shortest verse in the Bible. You'd think that church kids could pick a different verse to memorize, but that was the one we all aimed for. Jesus wept. Well, that story is that Jesus wept over the death of Lazarus. Well, in this story, Jesus wept again, but he wept over something so much greater and so much more significant. It's just powerful to think about it, because Jesus was weeping because they missed it. He was weeping because he had been with them day in and day out for 3 years, he and his disciples and others that were following. He had spent every day explaining who he was and living it out in front of them, the kind of king that he was going to be, and telling them how this was going to transpire, and this kingdom that he was going to reign over. He had told them all about it, and he was weeping because they didn't understand it. In this moment of truth, these final few days on earth before he went to the cross, they didn't understand. In John's account of this story, in chapter 19, Jesus says these words to his disciples. My kingdom is not an earthly kingdom. If it were, my followers would fight to keep me from being handed over to the Jewish leaders, which they did try to do earlier. It says, but my kingdom is not of this world. My kingdom is not of this world. And this has been a struggle for 2,000 years to see Jesus for who he really is. Jesus is the king of a kingdom that doesn't make any sense. Jesus was the king of a kingdom, and he showed it by riding in on a donkey. Today, he shows it, I so want to say it, by a bunch of donkeys like us, who end up messing everything up and missing the point, and yet he still chooses us to be loyal subjects in his kingdom, and to give us try after try after try, again and again and again, to hear him and then respond to him properly. And that's what I was caught by as I prepared this week. This is what Palm Sunday means to me, and it's what the triumphal entry means to me, is that finally I can understand what it was all about. So I want to end with this, with something that I read day before yesterday that was such an amazing thing that helped kind of crystallize the things that I was feeling. The author that I read wrote it this way: this is the kingdom we're being invited into, a kingdom that looks like sacrificial, Calvary-like love. It looks like Jesus riding on a donkey. It looks like him hanging on a cross for the sins of the world. So, take that. I encourage you to go back and reread the story again. You have some time. That excuse that we hold on to, that we never really have enough time to read the Bible because we're so busy doing other things. Well, for, I would guess, the majority of us, we have a little more time on our hands. So in between binge watching some other things and trying out new recipes on the grill outside, and by the way, I need to admit this, that I am watching with Wanda Downton Abbey. Don't judge me, okay? There are some of you that are cheering, and there are some of you that are shaking your head in disbelief, but we're watching that together and enjoying the time that we have. There are times during the day that I feel guilty that I am actually enjoying some of this time to do things in a different way, while there are so many people out in the world that are suffering. But somehow I think God can make sense of that. So take the time that has been given to you in whatever form that it is, and be wise with it and make good use of it. And I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you. Wanda wants to say something.
We know he's sideways. He doesn't know it. Sorry, guys.
I understand that, but I told you that early on, so you gave me a thumbs up, so this is what you get. So anyway, see you next time. Bye.
And I wasn't going to come in and interrupt what you were doing.